Senator Miles, and I am actually laying out on behalf of Senator Miles. You may wonder why Senator Perry is requiring to be the bill author to lay out Senate Bill 287. First of all, Senator Miles couldn't make it today, but this bill, unknowing to me when it was filed, would have unfortunate applications to my district. Specifically, Senate Bill 287, requirement for BYOB sexually oriented businesses to receive a TABC licensing. Members, the bill comes from a situation that was happening in my community, that being Senator Miles' community, that there was a sexually oriented business called Foxy's. Because it was a BOB, it was allowed to operate until all hours of the night. Neighbors around the venue reported an increase of crime and other problems associated with the patrons of this venue. While I say that most sexually oriented businesses try to best run a safe and legal establishment, we need to take a look at the bad actors within this state. Senate Bill 287, as written, would require BYOB sexually oriented businesses to get a permit under Alcoholic Beverages Code, TABC specifically. In this way, we can have some oversight on these businesses and make sure that those bad actors are forced to operate in good faith. On the night of March 10th, 2024, Aspen Blessing, a young lady in my district, was driving to work at a barista position at one of the local coffee shops at 4:30 in the morning. Unfortunately, someone, a patron, leaving one of the sexually oriented businesses, intoxicated, hit her head on and killed that young lady that night. Specifically, 287 addresses a loophole because they are not serving on the premises, but people are allowed to bring in their own alcoholic beverages and participate. They're really not held to any standards as far as hours of operation, as far as oversight on their patrons when they begin to become intoxicated. 287 would subject them to a TABC permitting process as well as oversight. Those places, whether you agree or disagree with why they exist, do seem to draw drugs, prostitution, and alcohol into it, and to not have any oversight on when they can be operated and how they're operated is a public safety issue. And if nothing else, the family of Aspen Blessing and her 6 siblings and mom and dad that showed up in my office after this bill was actually filed, unbeknownst to me, and their story is enough to, at a minimum, where we are already regulating alcohol, liquor sales in this state, to have that oversight in those establishments. I do believe we have a TABC witness as a resource if members have questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there questions of the senator? If not, public testimony is open. We do have 2 resource witnesses from TABC. Are there questions for them?
I would like to ask really one quick question.
The chair calls Matthew Cherry and Ron Swenson from TABC. Are they here? Please state your name and whom you represent.
Good afternoon, Senators. For the record, I'm Matthew Cherry, Senior Counsel for the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Swenson. I'm the Chief of our Enforcement Division.
Thank you.
Perry?
Specifically, you understand what the bill's target is to include those BYOB establishments, sexually oriented businesses in this particular setting, under TABC's enforcement and regulatory and framework. The question for you is, because they're not serving alcohol, can the state give that role to you, and can y'all actually fulfill the intended purpose?
Under the language currently in the bill, yes, we can.
Awesome.
Because that right now it just requires them, if they're going to allow the consumption of alcohol, it requires them to get a permit from TABC.
That's the nuance I was looking for. It doesn't have to be sold on premises, but they're actually consuming it on premises, gives y'all that jurisdiction.
Yes.
good.
There's one extra thing that I do feel that the agency would need to point out. If one of these establishments does allow full nude entertainment, they would then also be prohibited from obtaining a license or permit from TABC because we have some prohibitions in our code that prohibits that.
Interesting. So the definition of nudity is in the bill. So where does that leave us with someone, and I don't, without being too graphic, is pasties, does that still qualify under your world? Or would that be, if they were totally nude other than that, would that be something that falls out of y'all's purview? You couldn't issue a license there?
If they were with pasties, currently the way that these establishments get prosecuted, the pasties are, not a problem as long as there is no violation of the public indecency.
Okay. So you could still license those. There's not a loophole here that they're going to exploit.
Correct. There's not a loophole, and we do currently license establishments that are effectively topless, but,
Right.
covered from the bottom portion down.
By licensing, you would give them guidelines in how long they can be open and when they can be open, correct?
Yes.
And then there would be some element of monitoring patrons that if they're overserved, even though they're serving themselves, they would still have some responsibility in that?
Yes, they would.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Anything that we need to do that could potentially close the loophole where if it was totally nude, you can't issue the license but still need to enforce that area because of the consumption aspect, it would not do that today is what I'm hearing. If the establishment's totally nude, y'all don't have licensing jurisdiction, therefore they're outside the jurisdiction.
Yes, I would clarify that it's not that we don't have licensing jurisdiction, we're just prohibited from issuing it because of prohibitions that are currently in the alcoholic.
If you can't issue the permit, then you can't enforce.
That we could not correct.
So a totally nude establishment would be a loophole here. Now, there may be other local ordinances that prohibit that, but assuming that's not the case, would be a loophole that we need to consider going forward in order to get TABC enforcement and regulatory framework.
Potentially, and that's something that we're happy to talk to the office about and you about to see if there's any additional language.
To Senator Miles on that. To be clear, a totally nude facility isn't supposed to serve alcohol, or they can be BYOB establishments?
Under current law, they could be a BYOB establishment, but under this bill, if they did not hold a TABC permit and they were fully nude because they couldn't get a permit, then this would prohibit them from serving or allowing the consumption of alcohol.
I see where you're going there. So it's not a loophole, actually. It's just...
There's some, yeah, it's kind of circular.
Okay. I appreciate that information. Senator Enosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on some of those, so would it also guarantee that the establishments that are described here in Senate Bill 287 also adhere to the 51% rule?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
If those establishments would it guarantee that those establishments also are subject to the 51% rule regarding firearms and alcohol?
If they obtain a permit, then yes, they would still have to abide by that.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? Thank you guys for being here. Thank you. You are a very well-ran agency. We have a lot of them in the state, but you guys are fairly stellar in your performance and the things you do and the good things that you catch. So thank you for your service. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 287? Public testimony. Anyone wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 287? Chair is none. Public testimony is closed. Bill you left pending.